I'm Barbara Jo Converse Stevens from Downs, Kansas. I am a hand-built ceramic sculptor, and I am currently exhibiting in the beautiful Sandzén Gallery in Lindsborg, Kansas with Angela Muller, who does these incredible textured earth paintings. And I believe our work goes very well together because she uses earth elements as well as a connection with the Native American lore, just as I do in my ceramic sculpture. The show is running right now through October 25th. And since there wasn't an opening or closing, I hope you'll all take time to come and view all the beautiful work here. There are 6 artists right now, and so lots to see, lots to experience. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my work and how I come about what I do. I live in rural Kansas, very north central, and I grew up in the central part of Kansas around Pawnee Rock on a farm. And as a little girl, that's where I played all the time. I was rarely in the house, and my favorite place was in my daddy's magical forest. Now, when I was in 3rd grade, during science, the teacher was explaining forest, woods, and shelter belts. And I discovered that my daddy's magical forest, where I found treasures and got to ride pirate ships and did all kinds of incredibly wonderful things that children do, I found out that Daddy's magical forest was not a forest, not even a woods, and it was probably just a very large shelter belt. Well, I was crushed to the point of bursting into tears in the middle of class, and I could not wait to get home and off the bus and run to my daddy's forest and see if it was still there. To my absolute delight, it was still there, and just as I had always imagined it. But I did discover as I grew older that the magic was within me and my imagination, and those treasures that I found that were often pine cones, pieces of wood, interesting rocks, sometimes grasses or pine needles. Oh, all kinds of little treasures that I found. And when I grew up and discovered clay, and that it picked up the most minute texture, I decided to use those earth elements that I had treasured my whole life to make textures in the clay. The other thing that influenced my designs and my spirit that goes into my pieces are the ancient Native American women from 1,000 years ago. They made clay vessels, and they were daughters, wives, mothers, friends, teachers, artists, just like me. And for some reason, I feel a real tie that our lives are woven together and that we all form a huge community, even though they lived 1,000 years ago and I'm in present day. I love their simple forms, which really comes through in my work. A lot of my work is just draped over simple bowls or rocks or whatever I can find. And they remain very simple so that the focus is on these earthy textures and on the contrast with the colors. They remind me of shells that you might find on the beach, or flowers, or even sometimes some things that you might find under the ocean floor. A lot of my spirit goes into these pieces, mainly because, especially the pods that are in front of us, to me, that enclosed form emphasizes the community that has helped make me who I am and the artist that I have become. it's taken a long time. And so I really feel this pull of everyone who has supported me all these years, including those ancient women of 1,000 years ago. So I wanted to show you some of the textures I use and also how thin my clay is. This isn't typical to have a piece that is this thin. There are a few pieces I have that are as thin as a knife blade. And in comparison, this piece I found is probably almost 45 years old. And you can see the distinctive difference in the thickness between the thrown functional piece and the clay that I'm using now. It's the same clay as far as being stoneware. This is paper clay, and the paper that is mixed in with the clay helps to give it an added strength, which allows me to go this thin, because when it dries, the clay shrinks. When it fires, it shrinks again, which means it's scooting along that kiln shelf and can catch and crack and break. And so the paper helps strengthen it and allows me to do these pieces. So I have a thin piece like this, and I simply take my earth element and I press into the clay and bring out the various textures. This one's probably easy to see. This is just a dried gourd. It makes a little deeper pit. Sometimes this is like a bunch of needles put together, and I can stipple and get a very soft texture that can be a nice contrast with some of the deeper ones. I love the pine cones. There are so many different pine cones, and depending on which one you have depends on what kind of texture you get. Some of the fossils I have to lift the clay up and press the clay more into the fossil. And that's a little trickier, but it does make a very nice texture. And so when the clay is then glazed, and I do glaze while it's wet, which is unique, and then sand the glaze off so the glaze stays in the texture. And I could show you a piece. Oh, maybe. And this one has some grass in it, and then some, this is actually a meat tenderizer. I like using geometric things with the earth elements as a contrast. And so I sand that glaze off, and the glaze stays down in those grooves, and I think makes it look much more emphasized than it would otherwise. This time I'm showing quite a few spirit balls, and the Native Americans say that the maker of the spirit ball leaves their spirit within the spirit ball, and that's what you hear when you shake it. And so I've used a lot of the different textures. This is the fossil texture, and you'll find different rocks and gourds and the meat tenderizer and all different things as you look around my exhibit. I hope you have time to come visit this in person. It's really fun to touch the pieces, feel the textures, and hopefully you'll feel a little of my spirit that connects with you, and you'll become part of my community that has helped me get where I am today. Thank you.